If you've ever been to an Easter Vigil service, yes, that's that really long service that happens on Saturday night before Easter. We start with a fire outside, we come in, it's dark, we read a lot of lessons, and then eventually get to the point where we say, Christ is risen, and the bells ring, and the lights go on, and we sing, and we have communion, and the service ends saying, Christ is risen indeed. Well, if you've ever been to one of those very long services, you will recognize these Old Testament stories, for they are the stories we read when we're sitting in the dark at the beginning of the service. These are the Old Testament stories of God's salvation for God's people, and they are read sitting there, and they have such deep meaning to our traditions and our culture and our theology. And I sat here this year in the dark thinking, why don't we ever preach on these? Well, they're not in the lectionary, that's why. So why not have a special summer preaching series and get to use these marvelous texts? And so I was so excited because I got to preach first, and it was the story of creation. Now, you know we have two creation stories in the Bible, and this is not the one with Adam and Eve and the apple. No, this is the one that a person like me who likes order likes. This is the creation story where everything gets sorted out one day at a time, and it is all good. And we as humans are created in God's image, all of us. And it is not just good, it is very good. So I was so happy to be able to preach about this creation story of goodness. And then the seventh day of last week happened. And creation didn't seem so good anymore. You know, I was here at church. I came very early in the morning, and I had not heard what had happened in Florida until I got home at 3:30. There were some odd things in the morning, like John had prayed for gun violence in Florida. I thought he was talking about the singer who had gotten shot. And so when I got home, I was just shocked. I had been on this bubble all day, and the goodness of creation had been disrupted on the seventh day. Creation didn't seem so good anymore. The demons had filled Orlando. Demons had filled our whole country. You know, I think when the news reporters ask, what is your name? We as a culture should say Legion, because so many demons have seemed to come alive in our culture. The demons of hate, the demons of violence, gun violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, the demons of fear, the demons of mental illness, the demons of division, where we're divided by race or class or sexual orientation or heritage and pit against each other. And none of it is good. The events of last Sunday left me not feeling in my right mind. As I said in the e-letter we sent out on Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, I came home from work and I kept saying to my husband, Tom, you know, it was just such a hard day. I just feel like I want to cry all day long. I think I'm getting depressed. I don't know what's going on. And then Kevin had asked me to write something for the e-letter, and I was finding such a hard time writing it, and I realized, oh, I feel like crying because of all the demons. And they seem to have silenced me instead of being the person who jumps in and wants to speak out. All the demons were leaving me feeling helpless and full of fear and hopeless. I think I was feeling a bit like the people in the story, not Legion, but the people in the town. You know, they saw the healing of this man, and yet they were afraid. We have seen some incredible healing in our country and culture over these last few years for justice with the LGBTQ community, marriage equality, people being able to say the word transgender out loud and not having everybody fall over. There has been great healing. But I think I was afraid that the demons were still going to be greater and were going to come back with so much force that the healing would go away. I think the news of the demons unleashed last week had me so caught in fear, I was having trouble seeing the goodness in God's creation. But then I started work on my sermon, and I started looking again at this first story in the Bible, right there, the beginning, the creation. And it was right there. Creating, not just created. You know, this story, it's not a science story. Here's how it happened in 7 days. But it is a story that helps us grasp the amazing creative power of God to bring order out of formless void. Out of the darkness, God says, "Let there be light." And there is light, and it is good. God is creating goodness, even in these dark days. I've been reading the book, The Grammar of God, and the author, she is from a Jewish background, and she has just gotten caught how when she reads the English translations of some of the Jewish stories, she says, that translation's all off. That's not how we understand it in our tradition and culture. And in this creation story, the one thing that she helped me really clearly understand is that we have the translation that says, God created. Like it's finished, it's done completely. She said, really, if you look deeper into the Hebrew and into the culture and into the tradition, it would be better translated in the beginning of God's creating. Creating is a process, and it is still happening. This orderly account of God's creating, it draws us into the goodness of light and dark, the goodness of night and day, the goodness of sea and land, the goodness of the vegetation and the fish and the birds and all the animals. Even the sea monsters are called good. And the humans, us, we are good. In goodness, God is creating us in God's image. We are all in the image of God. We are all blessed by God. And then we are invited into the creating. Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth with goodness. With goodness. We are invited to interact with all the good that God has created. And when we get tired, we can rest on the seventh day, because rest is even good. Oh, I'm so glad rest is good. I like to sleep. Yesterday morning, I heard a story on the radio of one of the doctors from the emergency room near the Pulse, the nightclub where these atrocities of shooting happened. A hospital which was caught in the whirlwind of life and death for hours, working with victim after victim to save them. In the midst of all the trauma, the doctor noted that his shoes had just gotten covered in blood. But he also noticed in the midst of the trauma that there was a line around the building of people waiting to give blood. When he finally got to sit down and rest, he took off his shoes, his blood-soaked shoes, and he said he put them on his windowsill because every time the sun shone through onto those shoes, he wanted to remember all he had been through in this time of trauma, all the evil, and all the good, he said. All the goodness of the people who came and gave blood, the goodness of the volunteers who jumped in and helped, the goodness of the nurses and doctors who worked hours on end, the the goodness of the police, the goodness of the whole community who's rallying around each other in this time of need. From the distance of New York, it seems hard for me to see the goodness of the community that is supporting each other, that is there creating healing. But I remember after 9/11, when I worked down at Ground Zero, as hard as it was, there was a goodness of community, of people who were creating healing and hope and support. God is creating light in the darkness, and we can join God in this creating. We don't have to sit in the darkness and silent, chained up by demons, for we have already been healed, and we can offer that healing to others. So what can we do? Well, like I said, I'm a person who likes good order, so I've made you a list of things you can do. It's on the back table. Number 1 is pray. Pray without ceasing. We all need to pray, for our prayer is stronger than the demons. Secondly, we could write notes of encouragement. Do you remember here in New York after 9/11, all the cards and the notes just flooded in here from all over the country, all over the world? The Red Cross workers gave them all out to people at Ground Zero and to family members. I think there were letters taped to this wall of this church, as I recall. Well, in that list on the back of the church is a list of people you could write a letter of encouragement to. Bishop Robert Schaefer, who is the bishop of the Florida Bahama Synod, he and his staff could probably use a letter of encouragement right now. And Pastor Rob Kosma, who is the pastor at Reformation Lutheran Church, which is the closest church to the Pulse. The bishop is there this morning to be with that community. Or I've also listed the 11 Reconciling in Christ congregations in Florida. These are congregations like ours that have publicly said, we welcome and support LGBTQ people and their families. These 11 courageous congregations in the Florida Bahama Synod have a big role to play in helping the healing happen over these next months. So they need our encouragement too. You can send them a card or write them a letter, or you can put your name on a piece of paper in the back with the letters that I've already written for the bishop and Reformation Lutheran Church this week. Next week, we'll put together cards for the Reconciling in Christ congregations. Encouragement. It's important in the community. It's a part of the creating process. And then what else can we do? Well, our ELCA has an incredible advocacy center and office who sent out an email this last week that offered 2 concrete things we can do in relationship to our legislators and our governmental officers. You can send them an email, and you can go right on the ELCA website, you put your name, you put your address. They have a note that is based on our social statements and our teachings and our policies of the church to limit access to guns to people who do not, so that people who are mentally ill and should not have them do not have them. Type your name, address in, you hit the send button. And in today's world, an e-letter means a lot more to our government officials, because if you send a hard copy letter, it goes someplace in the basement where they have to check it for powder and this and that and make sure you're not sending. So it takes over a month for a letter to get to your government official. So send an email or make a phone call. Tomorrow's the day to make the phone call. You've probably heard there's legislation that's going to come up tomorrow. You've probably also heard that it has no chance of passing whatsoever. Those are the demons talking that want us to stay silent. If you call your legislator tomorrow and say, I want change in gun policy, it makes a difference. Even if it doesn't pass tomorrow, every call makes a difference. We can't let the demons silence us. And if you want to give funds, I know there's a lot of places you can give funds, but I just want to say that the bishop of the Florida Bahama Synod indicated that Lutheran Social Services of Florida is working together with Lutheran Disaster Response to directly bring help, relief, and comfort to victims and their families. So by giving through Lutheran Disaster Response and marking that it's for Orlando, you know it will directly go to care of victims and their families. Now, these are only a few suggestions, but you can take the letter on the back of the table if you want. Next Sunday, for our adult conversations, I'm telling all of you this because you have to come early to church at 10:10. Ross is going to lead a conversation about what our Christian calling is for calling for justice and rights for LGBTQ people. It's Pride Week, and we will be praying ceaselessly for no violence. And we will come together as a community to say, how do we proclaim as Christians this important message? This is what creating is about. And it is good. It is good to be a part of the healing creation, to be called together with Jesus to offer life, not death. Jesus said to the man, "Go back to your home and proclaim the good news." And that is what we do when we join God in creation. We proclaim the goodness. Christ has risen indeed. Alleluia.